in this episode.
You never know what's out there until you see it. You hear the stories.
Well,
you never know.
It's a lot easier now with the internet, and you can see the video. But the videos
That
does
not
do it justice.
No.
Videos do not do it justice. Being able to go to an event and stepping in the box, going mano a mano, that's when you really get the feeling of, ooh,
whoa,
I want more of that. Even though I'm getting my butt kicked, I want more of that.
Well, first you see the eyes go open, the mouths go wide, and you're like, what is that? Like, how old is that dude? Or the guy who just hits another gear around him first, running around, all of a sudden he's on third, and you're like, huh? Or all of a sudden he's stealing second, you're the catcher, and you throw, and he's basically saying you're on second, and you're like, what? I've never seen that. You can't understand it until you see it, because then you feel it.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of The Closing Pitch. My name is Spiker Helms, and this is a show about people, culture, and how to create a winning lifestyle. We're back at you with episode 2 from Atlanta. We are going to be heading into game 4 tomorrow morning. We had time to podcast before dinner, so we thought that this would be a good opportunity. If you haven't listened to the first episode that we had here in Atlanta, please do so. It's a super important topic that I shared a story from that. It's Island of Me. Please listen to it. I think that you'll get a lot of value out of it, especially the players and high school age groups. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little bit too young for the younger age groups, but I think
never a bad lesson to learn.
Yeah, never a bad lesson to learn, but I just think it's very applicable to the high school guys. In this episode, what we're going to be talking about is the experience factor of youth sports, high school sports, and then also where the value lies amongst the different tournament providers that you go play for and play against the teams that you play against. So without further ado, introduce Dave Burkby into the conversation. Dave, how are you doing?
Good, man. Good.
So Tim Bailey, our Fort Worth director, had an awesome post. An awesome post. And for those of you that don't know the Rawlings Tigers, that's obviously who we work for. And we have a program inside of the Rawlings Tigers called the National Team. And the National Team, what it is, it's made up of Tigers only from different parts of the country. They submit their information, and then a board of directors end up choosing the team, and they end up competing against compete in top level events, national events that normally our teams potentially couldn't get into. Like, you have to have a lot of weight to get into those events. Mm-hmm. And so the teams this summer, they struggled a little bit. Just to be honest,
sure.
They struggled a little bit. And in the winter, they did really, really well. But for the summer, they did struggle. And I wanted to jump into this conversation because his post was all about the experience. Mm-hmm. They played what teams did they play?
It doesn't matter. They played some of the top, so-called 25 teams in the country.
They were ranked nationally.
They faced the, number 1 team, the number 4 team, the number 22 team, some other teams that are really good. Long story short, they faced incredible competition. Probably didn't have the wins and loss record that they wanted. But the whole post and the whole reason we're kind of talking about this, and I'll just jump into it.
But hold on, before we go into this is not like typical rankings. This is like they are ranked nationally.
Sure.
These are national. Like, I hate when we talk about rankings and they're like, oh, everyone's ranked. It's not state rankings. It's national rankings and from Perfect Game. And these teams can play. They're dudes. Like, just to give you an example, you will see 85 to 88 at 13U and 14U. Like, it's the real deal.
Well, that was a part of the post. So, like, I think, and just to preface this, and the reason we're talking about this is because most times, if you were to ask a parent or even a player within the travel ball world about his previous team's weekend, and hey, how'd it go? How'd you do? Etc. What's the first thing they're going to say? Their record.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to base their entire experience off of the record. And then they're going to go in, so it's either going to be positive or it's going to be negative, and then they'll go into the minor details around it, the plane, the accommodations, the fields, the other teams they played, etc. But it always leads with the record. So it's almost as if the weight, if you're looking at like a pie chart, over half that pie is whether or not you won or lost that weekend. And if you lost, overall, the experience is generally going to be of a negative, tone. And unfortunately, well, one, that's going to happen. You can't avoid that, right? But I think there are things sometimes to look at that might have been very important things that you got to see in that situation that will help you down the road that maybe you're forgetting. That's kind of what we're going to talk about. So, for example, we're using one of our national teams that just played in a very, very high-end event. Again, played 5 games, did not have a great record. Okay,
arguably the best event in the weekend for that
yeah,
age
for
group.
sure, for
Definitely.
sure. And there were some games that were a little lopsided, right? And obviously there's going to be frustration, no doubt. Like players want to win, parents want to win, etc. But Tim's post was really, really good for a lot of reasons, because it was a good perspective post for one. Okay. He had a couple of the guys from his Fort Worth club there. We had dudes from St. Louis, Las Vegas, Charlotte, Pittsburgh, etc. So we had guys from all across the country. And my assumption is this, that some of those players had probably not ever seen that type of a competition level before. They're very good players. But that was like a next level type deal. Like what Spiker said, I mean, Tim made it in the post. They saw 4 dudes throwing in the 80s. One kid at 13U topped at 89 miles per hour. Okay? That's like the moon to some of these players.
It's another gear.
That's totally out of this world. I think you could probably ask them the same thing of what was the speed of the game like? Holy cow, they moved fast. They did this, they did that. What was their bat speed like? Holy cow, they did this, they did that. Like, I couldn't miss a pitch. I had to really execute. I had to bear down. And when I did, man, I really executed a pitch. I got him out. Okay? The fields, the experience, the way I've said this a million times, you're not going to see a direct benefit from that weekend tomorrow. But in a couple weeks, half a year down the road, having gained that experience, we've talked about this a million times, stacking those experiences, you all of a sudden go back to your area and events, which you're not going to see that everywhere. Well, the game's slower. Well, I've seen that. I just hit off a dude throwing 89. Now I'm facing 75, 78, which at 13U is really, really hard. That's not a big deal no more. All of a sudden, that dude's walking a little taller because he's been through that, right? And I think that's what Tim was trying to get across in that post. That, yeah, if you're just going to base that weekend on your record, well, no, we had a terrible time. What a waste of money. What a terrible experience that we had.
Well, that's the first thing that you go to is the money part of it,
right?
And last episode I spoke about my bad experience at 17U, and again it was money lost. I was traveling all over the country and I was living in hotels. We spent a whole bunch of money. I wasn't playing. Like, imagine that you're traveling all over the place, you're not playing, and I could only imagine what the pain that my parents were going through. And be like, shit, we invested all this money and like he's not playing, like what's going on? They end up changing the narrative and saying, Spike, this is the best investment we've ever made. Ever made. Like, yeah, that person's dumb. But what you're learning now, I would pay that over again.
Right.
And when you're playing in an event like that, and Tim, I give kudos to Tim. Like, I love talking to Tim. Went down to Fort Worth to visit him. And he had a really good perspective on it, which is the players experience something that they got to see a lot earlier than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be able to know, hey, I got to get my stuff together if I really want to play this game.
Sure.
Like if I want to play high school baseball, like, and again, he's from Texas.
Well,
Texas baseball is real good. Like it's real good. It's like California, Texas, Florida. They always lead. Like again, MLB draft. They're always the leaders in the MLB draft. Those states. And when you have a guy coming from Fort Worth saying they went into a tournament and they're like, "That's the best baseball I've ever seen."
So think about this, because he also mentioned one other very key pivotal point in his post. He mentioned that even himself, let alone his players, didn't know that caliber of a player or players or teams existed at that age group.
Which I'd be excited if I was a player. Like, hell yeah. I want to do that again.
Well, here's how I think it translates. Because if I was that player, and again, this, parents and players, you're not going to see this right away. But if I was that player, seeing that dude throw 89 on the mound, which is inconceivable at that age group, like that's crazy. To know that that's out there, now every time I go to the cages and work, I'm working to get to him.
Yep, 100%. That's a really good perspective.
I'm not working to get to the guy who was just a little bit better than me in my local area. That's attainable. I'm working to beat that guy. Now, what does that do to your work ethic? A lot of guys are going to take that experience and be like, okay, that guy K'd me. Well, next time I face that big boy, I'm not K'ing. I'm going to go work at it. And now it's like, well, hey, I'm going to ask my dad, hey, we need to go to the cage. We need to go play catch. And all of a sudden, they're going to start asking a little bit more. The guys who really want it, who let that experience be a driver for them. Because now they know it's out there. You never know what's out there until you see it. You hear the stories.
Well,
you never know.
It's a lot easier now with the internet, and you can see the video. But the videos don't do it.
That doesn't do it justice.
Do it justice. No. Videos do not do it justice. Being able to go to an event and stepping in the box, going mano a mano, that's when you really get the feeling of, ooh,
whoa,
I want more of that. Even though I'm getting my butt kicked, I want more of that.
Well, first you see the eyes go open, the mouths go wide, and you're like, what is that? Like, how old is that dude? Or the guy who just hits another gear around him first, running around, all of a sudden he's on third, and you're like, huh? Or all of a sudden he's stealing second, you're the catcher, and you throw, and he's basically saying on second, you're like, what? I've never seen that. You can't understand it until you see it, because then you feel it.
And you won't remember you'll remember that you got your butt kicked. You won't remember what the scores were. You 5 years down the road, you'll just look at it and be like, man, that was a turning point.
Oh yeah, I know.
That was a turning point.
I see it. I haven't directly coached young guys like that. I mean, I do in lessons and things like that, but I've never done it from a team standpoint. But I have a unique situation where this was earlier on in the Tigers story, if you will, year 3 or 4 summer, whatever, of our existence. And we had okay teams. We were decent. We started to finally go to some of the better events because we thought we could hang there, and we did okay. But, we went to one event down in Atlanta, Georgia, and played one of the nation's top teams that actually, to this day, had 3 big leaguers on it. And that game got real fast, real quick. And our dudes had never seen that. Never. They didn't know how to handle it. I mean, you're talking about a dude who was 92, 94 on the mound with plus stuff. Kevin Biggio, who's up for the Blue Jays maybe.
The Blue Jays, yeah.
And he hit 2 bombs in that game. And then there was a catcher who's up, and there was a shortstop, was Woody Williams' kid who's up. I mean, it was nuts, right? And it was a quick game from a score standpoint, and there wasn't much to say from the coaching staff after, because, hey, you were outmatched. Like, you were outgunned, outmatched, out-arsenaled, out at everything. I'm glad you showed up. We'll talk about this tomorrow. And You know what we did? It was amazing. what happened after that. Those guys, and some of them were from small towns in middle Missouri, had never seen that before. Some of them were just good high school players who had never been exposed to that before. All of a sudden, they now know that existed. The world went from being like this small to this big of baseball players. And for some of those guys, it was that little nudge that they needed to kind of go off and work at it a lot harder. It was cool.
It changes your whole perspective on the next season. Like that's what I enjoy. Like the next season, then you see those guys and they played that competition. I remember that 17U year, and I didn't play that much. But then when I got to my high school, I was like, dude, this is a cakewalk.
There's nothing.
This is an absolute cakewalk. Oh my God.
No situation seems tough. No situation seems big.
No. And like that, it got me the ignorance that I needed for when I went to junior college.
Yeah.
Like I could roll with these guys. Are you kidding me? That 17U year, I could easily go through junior college and just roll through these guys. It gave me that ignorance, like that confidence.
It gives
like that
you the
weird
been
confidence.
there, done that.
Yeah, like I've been here, done that. I've seen players. I know I've been around the block.
Yeah.
And it really helped me like catapult me my freshman year. The only time it didn't catapult me was like Missouri State, because then I was playing with those D1 guys that got recruited, and then I had to figure out that next level.
This is a stepping stone story.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not, because eventually the only stepping stone you can ever do is big leagues, right?
Yeah,
But like, I mean, for the most part, we're talking to the younger guys in this episode, because
but it gives you that confidence to go out there and say like,
for sure,
I can go compete with that guy.
So I guess long story short, and I'd be talking to the parents and the players in this one, and even the coaches, don't always look at those situations. Like okay, I will say this. We're not saying go put your team in a situation where it's no fun.
Yeah,
you cannot remotely compete, etc. Like don't just do that just for that, because you got to find the level where you have spurts. You have signs of being able to compete. And I'm not saying do that every weekend.
Like here's an example. So you've told me this story with the Rawlings Tigers where you mentioned it just previously. You played events, you were competing nicely, and then you took another jump.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I think we could probably compete in there. And then you guys didn't compete in there. Like you got your butt kicked. But then you realized, hey, this is what we need to compete at this level.
Right.
We'll wait, we'll come back, and we'll revisit that again.
Right.
And I think that's where we are with the national program, which is we competed really good in the winter events. Now we're at the summer events. We see what we need to work on, especially our players. They see what they need to work on. Our coaching staff obviously sees what they need to work on with Tim's post. And we're going to go back out there. We're going to learn, and then we're going to come back and try to compete with those boys again at some point. And that's what it's all about. It's not about you picking out the hardest schedule and then like going 4-30. That would be miserable. And it's not you going out there and picking a soft schedule and going 30-4.
Right.
Those are huge red flags. And if you're a player and you're on one of those teams, that's a huge red flag. You need to adjust that schedule. Again, we've always said the best schedule is if you're at a 600, 500 clip or just below 500. That's a really good schedule. That means that you got tested pretty well and you end up getting the wins that you needed to get. That's what you want. That's what you want. You don't want to be this, like, again, if you're in college baseball and you have that record, that's totally different.
Totally different.
If you're in pro ball and like
totally
the New York Yankees, that's totally different, because it is a compact, competitive schedule, and it's the best of the best.
Yeah, we're not talking about that.
Youth baseball and high school baseball, you have all shapes and sizes of teams. And again, that's what makes our culture really good, because it's growing and you want that. It's just you got to find out where you fit in as a player, as a team, and as a coach, and just keep trying to level up.
Stack experiences. We've said it a million times.
Yeah,
it's so true.
It's one of my favorite phrases. Stack experiences. Just try to find ways to stack experiences. Guys, that's this episode of The Closing Pitch. My name is Spiker Helms. Across from me is David Birkby. The biggest compliment you can ever give us is obviously a 5-star review. Like, we like hearing from you guys, and we love getting those emails. And but the biggest compliment I could ever receive is if you end up sharing this show with somebody that is near and dear to you, someone that's a friend, someone that's a family member. That helps us, but more importantly, it just says like, hey, these guys are good dudes. Listen to them. Let me know your thoughts, and then that gives us good feedback because then like relay that to us. We want to hear it. So, guys, thanks again. Appreciate you, and we will talk with you in the next episode.
See ya.